Breaking news, Steve Bannon denied his request for the so-called Club Fed when he's forced to report to prison. Sources telling CNN that the longtime Trump ally will not get a cushy prison assignment, but is likely to serve time in a Connecticut prison where he could be placed with violent criminals and sex offenders. A prison that does not have individual cells, but rather an open pod layout for inmates. And CNN is learning tonight that there is also a chance Bannon could be sent to New York City's infamous Rikers Island.
He's being told now by the Bureau of Prisons that he will be going to a low security prison. So he's behind the wall is what they call it. It's different than a camp. It has more confines for the inmates that are kept there. Also, violent offenders can be kept in a low security prison like the one Bannon is going to be reporting to in just a couple weeks in Danbury, Connecticut.
Hey, Steve, as a resident of Connecticut, it is my honor to welcome you to the Nutmeg State. And maybe while you're in Danbury Correctional, you'll find out what nutmeg really means. In all seriousness, is the taunting of Steve Bannon too much? Was it inappropriate for us to include Pastor Kenneth Copeland's laugh? Well, in the view of many Americans, including yours truly, if there's anybody who deserves the ridicule, it is Steve Bannon. And it's poetic justice that Bannon is heading to a prison experience that will be far worse than the Club Fed camp he was counting on. Bannon's political and media career have been marked by efforts to divide, mislead, and inflame the American public. Bannon co-founded the far-right Breitbart News. He was the CEO of Donald Trump's 2016 presidential campaign and served in the Trump White House as chief strategist and senior counselor. After leaving the White House, with Trump still in office, Bannon publicly called for the execution of FBI Director Robert Ray and infectious disease expert Anthony Fauci. In August 2020, a federal grand jury indicted Bannon on conspiracy and money laundering charges for his We Build the Wall fundraising campaign. According to the indictment, Bannon promised donors all contributions would go to building a U.S.-Mexico border wall, but instead, Bannon and his partners enriched themselves. Donald Trump pardoned Bannon, but presidential pardons don't cover state charges, and Bannon was then charged in New York State in connection with the We Build the Wall scheme. After the November 2020 election that Donald Trump lost, Steve Bannon helped coordinate and promote January the 6th, and the day before the Capitol riot, Bannon gave some hints on his podcast about what was coming.
All hell is going to break loose tomorrow. It's all converging, and now we're on, as they say, the point of attack, right? The point of attack tomorrow. I'll tell you this. It's not going to happen like you think it's going to happen, okay? It's going to be quite extraordinarily different. And all I can say is strap in.
During the congressional investigation into January 6th, Bannon refused to be interviewed or produce documents to the committee. And in 2022, a criminal trial jury convicted him of contempt of Congress. Bannon was sentenced to 4 months in prison, but the imposition of the sentence was delayed pending his appeals, which Bannon has exhausted. Now, Bannon and his lawyers are arguing he shouldn't have to go to jail this summer because it would interfere with his role in the Trump campaign.
They said this would effectively bar Mr. Bannon from serving as a meaningful advisor in the ongoing national campaign. Do courts care about that?
Nobody cares, and it's not relevant at all. And let me just explain to people why Steve Bannon is out of prison, even as of this moment. So he was convicted at trial, people will remember. He was sentenced to 4 months, and then he was given the courtesy of bail pending appeal, which means you get to stay out until your appeals are over, so long as you can show you have a substantial chance of winning on appeal. He's now lost his appeal, so he has very little chance. He has 2 last plays he can try. One, and he's asking the entire Court of Appeals to rehear the case. They almost never do that. I don't think they'll do it here. And then 2, he can ask the U.S. Supreme Court to step in. They very rarely do that. I think that's extremely long shot, too. And if he doesn't get either of those, he's got to surrender on July 1st.
And Bannon is not eligible for the lowest level of federal prison, the so-called Club Fed camps, because Bannon still has the pending criminal case against him in New York. In other words, if Bannon was only dealing with contempt of Congress, he would get the cushy Fed camp he wants. But because Bannon also faces a state trial over alleged fraud with his We Build the Wall, Bannon only gets a low-level federal prison. And as you heard, Bannon's fellow inmates could include violent convicts as well as sex offenders. And when Bannon leaves the federal prison to face a state trial in New York later this summer, Bannon's federal prison sentence will not be over. So at that point, Bannon could be held in New York's notorious Rikers prison and transported each day from there to his trial. And Rikers is infamous for its gangs, thugs, violent convicts, sex addicts, and misery. Fun times ahead for Steve Bannon. Until then, Bannon is not exactly showing humility or contrition. He recently gave a speech calling on younger conservatives to literally arm themselves and prepare for battle.
Are we at war? Is this a political war to the knife? Are you prepared to leave it all on the battlefield in 2024? On the afternoon of January 20th, we must free the 1,400 patriots and must incarcerate the criminals.
Free the patriots, he says, about those convicted in connection with January 6th. He calls them patriots. They attempted to overthrow democracy while engaging in violence. Steve Bannon helped them and then snubbed lawful orders to testify about it. A few weeks ago, Bannon warned that if he and Donald Trump get back to the White House, they will charge and jail journalists.
Put them under investigation, eventually indict them, try them, imprison them. It's guilty of treason. They knew that was a lie about Russian disinformation, just like you knew. We have to go back to the people that tried to steal this republic, to try to turn it into a fascist state, to try to turn it into a police state. And the media should understand, too, every text message, every email, every lie you told is going to be exposed. And yes, you're going to be held accountable.
And never mind a free press, Steve Bannon's targets for revenge and retribution include government bureaucrats and all administration officials, Democrats and Republicans, who have tried to block Donald Trump. And Bannon seems to be relishing the warning sirens from people who fear for America's Constitution.
We mock your fear. We want you to fear. It's going to be accountability. We are taking apart the administrative state. We're going to destroy the deep state, and we're going to hold everybody responsible that put this republic in the situation it's in today. Accountability, responsibility. And that will come with authority. The authority of Donald John Trump as the 47th president of the United States.
Here is former federal prosecutor Joyce Vance.
So for someone who says it's not about revenge or about vengeance, he seems to contradict himself pretty quickly. Look, the career ranks at DOJ, the people who do their jobs day in and day out and are committed to the Constitution, those folks aren't legitimate targets for political retribution. And I think it's chilling to hear what's going on here. This is payback for Donald Trump being held accountable. But Bannon, who's a master really of this sort of linguistics, tries to couch what they're doing, what's unconstitutional, in constitutional terms like accountability. And that forces all of us, by the way, to be very discerning listeners and to really do more than I think we've done at any point in time, even living through the Trump administration, to make sure we understand how our rule of law system of government should work and where problems are taking place.
There is no problem, though, for now, with how our justice system is handling convicted criminal Steve Bannon. His appeals for contempt of Congress have been exhausted. He's headed to a federal prison, not a prison camp, and he'll be housed next to all kinds of degenerates, including violent convicts, drug users, and sex offenders. One imagines some of them will be quite excited to meet Donald Trump's chief strategist and talk about things. To be clear, I don't wish violence or prison rape on anybody. I hope Steve Bannon serves out his sentence in peace. But Steve Bannon represents literally the worst in U.S. politics. He is a chief enabler for Trump MAGA threats to America's constitutional democracy. And if Bannon is nervous or worried that his prison experience won't be as easy as he expected, that's a good thing. It's the start of justice being served. By the way, one of Donald Trump's spiritual advisors has now admitted to molesting a 12-year-old girl.
And I thank you for our president. I thank you, Lord, for our leaders. I thank you, thank you, thank you.
That is Donald Trump's spiritual advisor, Robert Morris. And now, as reported by the Christian Post, Pastor Robert Morris confesses to moral failure after a woman claims he began molesting her at age 12. Through the years, Morris has admitted that as a teenager, he preyed on young girls.
I was very sexually immoral as a teenager. And it started early in my life, and it was very easy for me.
Robert Morris, founding pastor of Gateway Church in Southlake, Texas, which attracts an estimated 100,000 worshipers weekly, has confessed to inappropriate sexual behavior with a young lady more than 35 years ago while he was a young pastor, after a woman accused him of sexually abusing her for multiple years, beginning when she was 12. Check out that video at the link below. It generated a lot of comments on YouTube. I also look forward to reading all of your comments about Steve Bannon being denied the Fed camp he was hoping for and facing a prison experience that's going to be a lot worse than he anticipated. I'm David Shuster. Thanks for joining us.